violence upticks in Syria and in Iraq, in Pakistan, and in Kashmir. So the threat here to India is not that there's going to be some sort of amalgamation of Pakistan and Afghanistan into some sort of Islamic superstate. The Pakistanis can't control it. The challenge is from Pakistan's weakness. The biggest risk to India right now is that Pakistan's internal inconsistencies under the Khan government just collapse the place under its own incompetence, and Pakistan falls into a period of kind of internal navel gazing where the question becomes who can duct tape this place together. And in that environment, the Haqqani network is going to be doing things in Kashmir without any sort of sponsorship from Islamabad. So there is a risk of greater violence to India, but not at the state level. And as long as Pakistan can hold on by the fingernails, the nuclear question is held at bay, at least for now. The key thing to remember about the Chinese system in general is it's not like India, it's not like the United States, it's not like Britain, it's not like Australia. It's centrally planned. It's a fascist economic model. And so it takes a number of people, several dozen, probably several thousand actually, who are working in concert to a single goal to micromanage every aspect of the system. But for reasons financial and demographic and trade and populist, the economic model that the Chinese have been following has been failing for some time, and it's really on its last legs now. So Chairman Xi has come to the conclusion that the Chinese government can no longer guarantee economic growth, because if the Americans shut off the export markets, that goes away. If they have problems getting energy, everything goes away. So he's trying to convince the average Chinese citizen that it's not just about the economics, that it's about politics, that it's about nationalism. And so he's established a cult of personality so he can completely control that silo. That means that he has executed, imprisoned, intimidated into silence, or exiled everyone in the country who is capable of independent thought. And if anyone shows a degree of management competence that is perceived by the average Chinese citizen as to be equal or better than the Communist Party, that's a threat. That's why he's been going after the big companies. But it also means that he's shot the messenger, in some cases literally, so many times that he can't even get an accurate read of what's going on in his own country. And that's why we're getting these policy mismatches. That's why we had the electricity failures. That's why they're power rationing. That's probably where this guidance for stockpiling food has come from. That's certainly where the big nationalist decisions on Southwest Tibet or wolf warrior diplomacy or Hong Kong or Taiwan are coming from. And in this sort of environment, you can guarantee that when the guy at the top is making decisions all by himself with limited input and no one is willing to tell the boss when, he might be wrong, he's going to make mistakes. He's going to make catastrophic, system-shattering mistakes. And so from our last talk, we talked about how the Chinese are facing a demographic collapse and an economic close down and an export collapse. We can now add incompetent leadership to the very top of that list. And in that sort of environment, I think of China as kind of now a cross between Pakistan and North Korea. One guy's in charge, making lots of mistakes, and the whole system is shaking apart. Yeah. Now, from an Indian point of view, a weak China is not as dangerous as a weak Pakistan. The Himalayas are in the way. The jungles of Southeast Asia are in the way. If China implodes, historically speaking, it has imploded upon itself and had very limited impact on anyone who even borders it, much less is an ocean away. Pakistan's a bigger security threat in that regard because you actually do have a land bridge that's populated. But still, this is a country of over 1 billion people. This is the center weight of the global manufacturing system. The danger to India is not a security one, it's an economic one, because India, like many countries around the world, has not yet taken the steps necessary to become a major manufacturing power in its own right. We're all dependent upon the Chinese, and we can't unwind that in a day. Well, let's deal with India last, because we need to put it all in context. So number one, the French. The French are not an Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean power. There was no way that in anything other than an American guaranteed global peace that the French could supply equipment over the long term to Australia. The French are not nearly as surprised that this deal fell through. They were more surprised when it happened in the first place. And so they were disappointed and offended, but they weren't really shocked. Second, Australia. Now, what's going on with the Australians is they have been going out of their way for quite literally decades to be the best friend of the United States that they can be. They were there in World War II. They were there in Korea. They were there in Vietnam. They were there in Iraq. They were there in Afghanistan. They have always been a creative, willing ally, and they have been lobbying Washington for decades to get the best weapon systems that they can. So from Canberra's point of view, this is the culmination of 80 years of foreign policy. And they're ecstatic. Everyone focuses on the submarines. And I don't mean to suggest that they're not important, but the real weapon system that matters here are the medium-range cruise missiles that the Australians will now have, which means that the Australians can now threaten Chinese shipping throughout the entire Malacca region. That puts Australia as one of only 4 countries in the world that can destroy China in a day. India, because it can interrupt the energy flows. Japan, because it has a better long-reach navy. The United States, of course, and now Australia. So here's a country of just over 30 million people that all of a sudden is punching 10 times above its weight. They're ecstatic. Third, the United States is retooling its alliance structure. We're done with Europe. Aside from the legacy bases in Germany, which honestly only exists still to support Middle Eastern operations, we don't have troops there anymore. So we only have a handful of allies that we're looking to maintain relationships with in the future. The United Kingdom, Australia, obviously, Japan, and Singapore. That's everything. Which brings us to India. The question is whether or not the Indians and the Americans can find a middle ground in their security concerns. Now, if you look at the big picture, the United States wants to prevent regional powers from being more than regional powers. India wants to be the dominant power of the Indian Ocean basin, but it doesn't have ambitions beyond that. This is a perfect match. We just kind of have to get over one another's nationalistic imperatives here. That's totally doable. And the framework for the Quad is kind of perfect for that. It is not a military alliance. It is a conversation shop where the 4 powers bring their concerns together and they see if they can find some help from one of the other 3 to achieve their goals. It's a friendship forum which can possibly lead to an alliance. But considering where India is right now with its weapons technology, its ambitions, its problems with the Pakistanis, this is honestly a more realistic approach to any sort of long-term relationship building than an alliance would be. Because a real alliance, a direct alliance between Washington and India would mean that you'd have American troops in Kashmir. Do you want that? Because we don't. But if we have a situation where we can talk about things like Kashmir, talk about things like Islamabad, and bring in the Japanese for some economic strength and the Australians for that creativity that they always bring to every relationship, this is exactly what India needs right now. In many ways,